The rain hammered against the glass windows of the towering corporate building like a warning no one was listening to. Inside the cold marble lobby of Zenith Oil and Gas headquarters in Victoria Island, Lagos, a young woman stood trembling, her hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Her name was Ada. 23 years old, orphaned at 16, and currently employed as a junior receptionist, earning 60,000 naira a month. Barely enough to rent a single room in Aja and feed herself twice a day. But today, money was the least of her problems. Today she had seen something terrible. Ada had woken up at 3 in the morning drenched in sweat, her heart pounding like a war drum. The dream had been so vivid, so real, that even now, 5 hours later, she could still smell the burning rubber and hear the sound of metal crushing against concrete. She had seen him. Mr. Chukwudi Okafor, the Chief Operating Officer of Zenith Oil and Gas. The man who signed her paycheck, the man who barely knew her name, the man who was going to die today if she didn't stop him. In the dream she saw Mr. Chukwudi stepping into his sleek, black Range Rover at exactly 11:45 in the morning. She saw him adjusting his tie in the rearview mirror, his driver starting the engine. She saw them pulling out of the company garage and turning left onto Adetokunbo Street. Then she saw the truck, a massive trailer carrying steel rods. Its brakes had failed. It came barreling down the road like a beast with no soul, slamming into the side of the Range Rover with a force that flipped the car 3 times before it exploded into flames. Ada had woken up screaming. Now she stood in the lobby, her cheap polyester uniform clinging to her back with nervous sweat. She had tried calling his office. His secretary had blocked her. She had tried sending an email. It bounced back, unread. She had even tried stopping his personal assistant in the hallway. The woman had looked at her like she was mad. "Do you know who Mr. Chukwudi is?" the assistant had hissed. "You think he has time for random girls with stories?" But Ada couldn't let it go. She had lost her parents in a car accident 7 years ago. She knew what death looked like when it was coming. And this time she had been given a chance to stop it. So she waited. At 11:30, the elevator doors opened. Mr. Chukwudi Okafor stepped out, flanked by 2 bodyguards and his driver. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a custom-fitted navy blue suit that probably cost more than Ada's entire year's salary. His face was stern, focused, the face of a man who controlled millions and had no time for distractions. Ada didn't think. She moved. "Sir, please!" she shouted, rushing toward him. The bodyguards immediately stepped in front of her, blocking her path. One of them grabbed her arm roughly. "Back off," he growled. "Sir, please, just listen," Ada begged, her voice breaking. "Don't get in that car, please. Something terrible is going to happen." Mr. Chukwudi stopped walking. He turned slowly, his sharp eyes landing on her. For a moment, there was silence. "Who is this?" he asked, his voice deep and cold. "She's one of the receptionists."
"Sir?" his personal assistant said quickly. "I don't know what she's doing here." "Sir, my name is Ada," she said, her voice shaking. "I work at the front desk. I had a vision last night. I saw you getting into your car today. I saw an accident. A truck. Please, sir, don't leave at this time. Please." The bodyguards exchanged glances. The personal assistant rolled her eyes. Mr. Chukwudi stared at Ada for a long, cold moment. Then he did something no one expected. He laughed, not a kind laugh, a mocking one. "A vision," he repeated slowly, as if tasting the word. You had a vision. Yes, sir? Ada whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. I know it sounds crazy, but I saw it. Please, just delay your trip by 1 hour. That's all I'm asking. Mr. Chukwudi took a step closer. His presence was overwhelming, like standing in front of a wall.
Do you know how many meetings I have today? He asked quietly. Do you know how much money is riding on the deal I'm about to close? I understand, sir, but no, he cut her off. You don't understand. You don't understand what it takes to run a company like this. You don't understand pressure. You don't understand responsibility. What you understand is superstition and village nonsense. Ada's chest tightened. I'm not from a village, sir, she said quietly. I'm an orphan. I lost my parents in a car accident. I know what death looks like, and I saw it in my dream. I am begging you, please. For a brief second, something flickered in Mr. Chukwudi's eyes, something almost human, but it disappeared just as quickly. Security, he said, turning away. Make sure she doesn't follow me. Sir, please, Ada cried out.
But the bodyguards grabbed her by both arms and pulled her back. Mr. Chukwudi walked toward the glass doors without looking back. His driver opened the car door. He slid into the back seat. The engine roared to life. Ada watched helplessly as the black Range Rover pulled out of the garage and turned left onto the street. 11:45 a.m., exactly as she had seen. She sank to her knees on the cold marble floor, tears streaming down her face. Please, God, she whispered, please let me be wrong. But deep down, she knew she wasn't. 30 minutes later, the building shook, not literally. But the energy shifted. People started running. Phones started ringing. Voices rose in panic. Ada was still sitting in the lobby, her face buried in her hands when she heard the scream. There's been an accident. Her head snapped up.
A group of employees rushed past her toward the executive floor. She stood up on shaky legs and followed them. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. On the television screen in the conference room, the news was already breaking. Breaking! Fatal accident on Adekunbo Street. Multiple casualties. The camera panned to a scene of chaos, smoke, twisted metal, a black Range Rover crushed like a tin can, firefighters spraying water on flames, paramedics pulling bodies from the wreckage. Ada's legs gave out. No, she whispered. No, no, no. People around her were crying. Some were on their phones. Others stood frozen in shock. Is he dead? Someone asked. I don't know, another voice replied. They said he's in critical condition. Ada covered her mouth with both hands, bile rising in her throat. She had tried. She had warned him, and he had laughed at her. 3 hours later, the hospital confirmed it. Mr. Chukwudi Okafor was alive. Barely. He had suffered a fractured spine, internal bleeding, a collapsed lung, and severe head trauma. His driver had died on impact. One of the bodyguards was in a coma. The company was in chaos. Executives scrambled. Lawyers appeared. Families wept. And Ada sat alone in the lobby, staring at her hands. She had seen it. She had warned him, and no one had listened. 2 weeks later, Ada was called into the executive floor. She had been avoiding the building as much as possible, but her supervisor told her she had no choice. Someone wanted to see her. When she stepped into the private hospital suite where Mr. Chukwudi was recovering, she barely recognized him. He was lying in bed, his body wrapped in bandages, tubes running from his arms, his face pale and hollow. But his eyes were open, and they were looking right at her. Come in, he said, his voice hoarse. Ada stepped forward slowly, her hands trembling. You were right, he said quietly. She didn't know what to say. I should have listened, he continued. I thought you were crazy. I thought you were wasting my time, and now my driver is dead because of my pride. Tears filled Ada's eyes.
"I'm sorry, sir," she whispered.
"Don't apologize," he said, his voice breaking. "You tried to save me and I mocked you." There was a long silence.
"How did you know?" he asked.
Ada looked down.
"I don't know, sir.
I saw it. Like a movie in my head. I couldn't ignore it."
Mr. Chukwudi closed his eyes.
"My whole life, I've believed in logic, numbers, facts. I thought people like you who talked about dreams and visions were backward, uneducated." He opened his eyes again. "But you saw the future, and I was too arrogant to believe it." He reached for a button on the side of his bed and pressed it. A lawyer entered the room moments later. "Draw up a contract," Mr. Chukwudi said. "I want this young woman hired as my personal assistant. Full benefits, housing allowance, education sponsorship if she wants it." Ada's mouth fell open. "Sir, I don't understand." "You saved my life," he said simply, "even when I didn't deserve it. That's the kind of person I want around me." Tears streamed down Ada's face. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. Mr. Chukwudi smiled weakly. "No, thank you." But what Ada didn't know was that this was only the beginning, because the accident wasn't random. And the people who had orchestrated it were still out there, watching, waiting, and they weren't finished yet. 3 months after the accident, Mr. Chukwudi Okafor returned to work. He walked with a cane now, his steps slower, his body still healing. But his mind was sharper than ever. And he had questions, lots of them. Why had the truck driver's brakes failed? Why had the route he took that day been unusually clear of traffic? Why had his usual security team been replaced at the last minute with men he barely knew? The police had ruled it an accident. But Mr. Chukwudi didn't believe in coincidences anymore, not after Ada. Ada, who now sat in the office next to his, managing his schedule, screening his calls, and quietly watching everyone who came near him. She didn't talk much. She didn't need to. Her presence alone had become a shield. And people noticed. "Why is she always around him?" one of the senior managers whispered in the hallway. "I heard she predicted the accident," another replied. "That's rubbish. She's just a girl from nowhere." But the whispers didn't stop Ada from doing her job. She had learned long ago that poor people weren't allowed to make mistakes. So she worked twice as hard, stayed twice as late, and made sure Mr. Chukwudi never had a reason to regret trusting her. One evening, as she was organizing files in his office, Mr. Chukwudi looked up from his laptop. "Ada," he said. She turned. "Yes, sir?" "Do you still have those dreams?" She hesitated. "Sometimes, sir." "Have you had any recently?" She bit her lip. "Yes, sir." His eyes sharpened. "About what?" Ada set the file down and walked closer. "About you, sir. And someone close to you." "Who?" She swallowed hard. "I don't know yet, but I see betrayal, I see money, and I see danger." Mr. Chukwudi leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight. "Tell me everything," he said. That night, Mr. Chukwudi couldn't sleep. He lay in his massive bed in his Ikoyi mansion, staring at the ceiling, replaying Ada's words in his mind. "Someone close to you." He thought about his business partners, his executives, his family. And then he thought about the one person who had been by his side for over a decade, his deputy, Mr. Emeka Nwachukwu. Emeka was more than a colleague. He was a brother. They had built Zenith Oil and Gas together from the ground up. They had shared wins, losses, secrets. But lately, something had felt off. Emeka had been distant, evasive. He avoided eye contact during meetings. He left early. He took calls in private. Mr. Chukwudi reached for his phone and made a call. "I need you to look into someone," he said quietly. "Who?" the voice on the other end asked. "Emeka Nwachukwu. I want to know where his money is going, who he is meeting, everything." There was a pause. "Are you sure, sir?" "Yes," Mr. Chukwudi said. "I'm sure." 2 weeks later, the investigator returned with a report. Mr. Chukwudi sat in his office with the folder in front of him, his hands clenched into fists. Inside were bank statements, emails, photos. Emeka had been siphoning company funds for over a year. Millions of naira transferred into offshore accounts, hidden under fake contracts. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the plan. Emeka had hired someone to tamper with the brakes on Mr. Chukwudi's car. He had arranged for the security team to be replaced. He had orchestrated the entire accident. Why? Because if Mr. Chukwudi died, Emeka would inherit his shares in the company, and with those shares he would become the majority owner. Mr. Chukwudi felt like he couldn't breathe. "Ada," he said quietly. She appeared in the doorway immediately. "Yes, sir?" "You were right," he said, his voice hollow. "It was someone close to me." She walked over slowly and saw the pain in his eyes. "I'm sorry, sir," she whispered. He looked up at her. "If you hadn't warned me that day if I had died, no one would have known. He would have gotten away with it." Ada didn't respond. She just stood there, a quiet presence in the storm. "What do I do now?" he asked, more to himself than to her. "You fight," Ada said simply. "You survive."
You make sure he never hurts anyone again. Mr. Chukwudi nodded slowly. "Call the lawyer," he said. "And call the police." "Yes, sir." The arrest of Emeka Nwachukwu sent shockwaves through the corporate world. Headlines screamed, "Betrayal at Zenith Oil and Gas, Deputy CEO arrested for attempted murder." Employees whispered. Shareholders panicked. Competitors circled like vultures. But Mr. Chukwudi stood firm. With Ada by his side, he restructured the company. He fired every person connected to Emeka's schemes. He rebuilt his security team. He tightened every loophole. And slowly, Zenith began to rise again. But more than that, Mr. Chukwudi began to change. He started paying attention to the people who worked for him, the cleaners, the drivers, the receptionists, the ones everyone else ignored.
He remembered what it felt like to almost lose everything because he didn't listen to a poor girl with a dream, and he vowed never to make that mistake again. 1 year later, Ada stood in front of a university building wearing a cap and gown. Mr. Chukwudi had sponsored her education, full scholarship, business administration. As she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, she looked into the audience and saw him sitting there, clapping with tears in his eyes. After the ceremony, he pulled her aside. "I'm proud of you," he said. "Thank you, sir," Ada replied, smiling. "For everything." "No," he said. "Thank you. You didn't just save my life. You taught me how to see people, how to listen, how to be human again." Ada felt her throat tighten with emotion. "What will you do now?" he asked. She looked at him steadily. "Whatever you need, sir. I'm not going anywhere." Mr. Chukwudi smiled. "Good, because I just promoted you." Her eyes widened. "To what?" "Chief of Staff," he said. "You start Monday." Ada laughed through her tears. From orphan to receptionist, to personal assistant, to chief of staff, from invisible to indispensable, all because she refused to stay silent when she saw danger coming, and all because one man finally learned to listen. Years later, when people asked Mr. Chukwudi Okafor how he survived betrayal, loss, and near death, he always gave the same answer. I was saved by an orphan girl who saw what I couldn't, and I was foolish enough to ignore her. But God gave me a second chance, and I didn't waste it. Ada went on to build her own foundation, helping other orphans and vulnerable young people find education, jobs, and hope. And every year, on the anniversary of the accident, she and Mr. Chukwudi would sit together in his office and remember the day everything changed, the day he ignored her, and the day he almost lost everything because of it. But also the day he learned the most important lesson of his life. Never underestimate the voice of someone the world has overlooked. Because sometimes the smallest voice carries the loudest truth.